ThunderCats had a movie. It was ready. It never made it to theaters. The man who created the classic cartoon was not an animator. He was a toy inventor. And when the toys stopped, the show was quietly abandoned. For anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, ThunderCats is unforgettable. Lion-O, the Sword of Omens, that music, those effects, those characters. But what nobody tells you is how it all ended. The name you never heard in a single episode is Tobin Wolfe. He was not a writer. He was not an animation director. He was a toy inventor who worked for a licensing company called Leisure Concepts Incorporated. In 1983, he created ThunderCats, not as a story to be told, but as a product line to be sold. The characters were designed with one single thing in mind: to look good in a toy box. Lion-O with a sword that extended big enough to impress on a shelf. Panthro with his battle nunchucks. Mumm-ra with that colossal mutant form no child could ignore in a toy store. Every visual detail was calculated for a department store shelf. The scripts, the animations, all of that came later, and that makes all the difference to understand what happened next. The studio hired to turn these toys into an animated series was Rankin Bass Productions, and they did something few studios would have had the nerve to do. They produced 130 episodes before a single one aired. 130 episodes, all complete, all finished, before any television audience had seen the first one, before any confirmation that the public wanted that show. The entire first season was produced in the dark, a total bet on a product that had not yet proven it worked. On the other side of the television, a war was being fought. A group called Action for Children's Television, the ACT, was pressuring the federal government to regulate what children watched on Saturday mornings. The argument was direct and devastating. Shows like ThunderCats were not entertainment. They were advertising in disguise. Series created exclusively to exploit the psychological vulnerability of children, and turned every episode into a 30-minute commercial window. The FCC opened investigations, congressional hearings were called, and Rankin Bass responded in a way few studios would have. They hired a psychologist. Dr. Robert Koisis was brought in to read and evaluate the script of each one of those 130 episodes, individually, before any recording took place. The mission was clear: ensure that every story delivered a positive moral lesson: honesty, friendship, justice, perseverance. It was because of Koisis's guidance that every episode ended with the characters speaking directly to the audience, summarizing the lesson of the day out loud. That was not narrative closure. That was intentional architecture. ThunderCats was one of the few cartoons of the era with a dedicated psychologist, ensuring that no episode went to air without a clear moral purpose. Parents were demanding accountability, and Rankin Bass delivered. In the United Kingdom, the BBC was even more direct. It banned entire ThunderCats episodes for content it considered inappropriate for children. ThunderCats was under simultaneous attack on both sides of the Atlantic, and the series had not even completed its first season yet, but it survived because there was something regulators could not ignore. The sales were impossible to stop. And here is a detail most fans never knew. The animation in ThunderCats was not American, it was Japanese. The Pacific Animation Corporation, based in Tokyo, was responsible for the frames that appeared on television. And the quality gap was immediate. The movements were fluid in a way that American studios of the era simply could not replicate at the same cost. The backgrounds had detail. The fights had weight. That was the difference you felt without being able to name it as a child. That feeling that ThunderCats looked more real than any other cartoon on television. And while parents complained and regulators investigated, children watched and parents bought. Store shelves could not keep up with demand. LJN Toys, the company responsible for the licensed toy line, was producing action figures, vehicles, castles, and selling out before Christmas 1985. ThunderCats was a commercial phenomenon that no congressional investigation could stop. When a show clears toy shelves before Christmas, what could possibly go wrong? And then, in 1986, Rankin Bass and LJN decided it was time to go beyond television. ThunderCats Ho! Was produced with a scale and ambition far greater than any weekly episode, with a narrative structure, a visual budget, and characters conceived for an experience that transcended the after-school format. 3 new characters had been created specifically for this production: Lynx-O, Mumm-ra, and Bengali. They were not filler characters. They were the future of the franchise, designed to introduce a new generation of ThunderCats in a production worthy of everything the series had built. But here is something that changes everything. In 1986, other toy-based films went to theaters: Transformers, the movie; GoBots, Battle of the Rock Lords; My Little Pony, the movie. All of them failed at the American box office. 3 major franchises, 3 bets on large-scale productions. The same year, all failed. Market confidence in the franchise animation model collapsed, and Rankin Bass abandoned the theatrical release of the film. ThunderCats Ho! Was cut into 5 parts and became episodes 66 through 70 of the second season. Lynx-O, Mumm-ra, and Bengali entered the series as regular television characters. Most fans who grew up with them never knew they were supposed to be the beginning of something much bigger. That was the first crack, and it was not the last. In 1987, LJN Toys made a decision that no episode of ThunderCats would ever mention. The company discontinued the product line, not because the show was unpopular. The audience still existed, and the episodes were still being watched by millions. But the market for animation-based franchise toys had saturated beyond recovery. The same shelves that cleared in 1985 were now full of products nobody wanted. The commercial window had closed, and without the toy line generating revenue, the contract that kept ThunderCats on the air lost its economic foundation. Because ThunderCats was never created to tell a story, it was created to sell products. And when the products stopped selling, there was no longer any financial reason for the show to continue existing. The 3rd season was produced with a visibly reduced budget. The Pacific Animation Corporation, which had given the show its signature fluidity, was progressively replaced by cheaper animation. The movements lost their precision. The backgrounds lost their detail. The scripts became repetitive. Lion-O kept running the same journey. Mumm-ra kept performing the same transformation ritual. The new characters introduced in the final seasons did not carry the same weight as the originals. The formula that had worked in 1985 was being executed with half the resources and none of the original ambition. The 4th season was the last. In 1989, ThunderCats was cancelled, not with an epic conclusion, not with a finale that acknowledged years of fan loyalty. The final episode simply ends. Lion-O wins. The series stops. No farewell, no closure. As if the studio knew it was not ending a show, but fulfilling a contractual obligation that had expired. The fans expected a finale worthy of everything the show had promised. What they got was silence. In 2011, Cartoon Network bet on a reboot, darker, more complex, with narrative arcs that respected the intelligence of the adult audience that had grown up with the original show. It was the version of ThunderCats that many fans had always wanted to see. Critics received it well. The audience responded, and then it was cancelled after a single season, without resolution, without closure, exactly like the original, as if ThunderCats was always destined for the same ending, regardless of the era, to be abandoned before the finish line. And here is the cruel irony that nobody mentions when they talk about ThunderCats. The show taught loyalty. It taught that a true leader never abandons those who depend on him. That power without responsibility is empty. That betrayal is the worst possible crime. Those were exactly the lessons parents were demanding cartoons teach their children. And Rankin Bass was responsible enough to hire a psychologist to ensure, episode by episode, that the content was worthy of its audience. And yet, when the toys stopped selling, the show was abandoned. No warning, no finale, no farewell. Not by the critics, not by the parents, not by the FCC, not by the ACT, by the same company that created it, by the same commercial system that had turned Lion-O into an icon. ThunderCats was not destroyed by its enemies. It was abandoned by the ones who profited most from it. And that is the truth that 130 episodes never had the courage to tell. If this video made you see one of the most iconic series of the 80s in a completely different light, share it with someone who grew up watching ThunderCats. And if you want to know the dark origin of another classic that television kept hidden from you, subscribe to the channel, because the next video is about a character who seemed harmless but had a deeply disturbing past. See you then.